Have you ever wondered how the objects you see on display at a museum come to be there? Where did they come from, and where do they go when they're not in the galleries? In this video, we're going to walk you through the life cycle of an object at the Museum of Healthcare at Kingston, from the time it first comes into contact with the museum, through its cataloging, display, and beyond. The first step for any object coming into the museum is to go through the donation process. Most of the objects in our collection come to the museum by donation, whether from a private individual or from other institutions. The donation process works a little differently at every museum, but at the Museum of Healthcare, the first thing that generally occurs is that a donor will approach the museum with an object, or a bunch of objects that they'd like to donate. We then ask them to send us photos of the object and to tell us a little bit more about its provenance, the life that it lived before being donated to the museum. The photos of the objects, like the examples here, are for us to use to determine whether we already have the same thing in the collection, to assess the condition of the objects, and generally decide whether they fit the museum's mandate and would be a good and useful addition to our collections. The curator and collections manager discuss this together, and they make a decision about whether or not to accept the donation, and then the curator reaches out to the donor and lets them know what they decided. If the object is accepted, the museum and the donor work together to arrange for the delivery of the object to the museum, whether by courier, pickup, or drop-off, and both parties sign a temporary custody receipt, which indicates whether the donor ever wants the object back. The museum staff then repackage the object to mitigate dust, pests, smells, or mold that might be present, and we put tags on it and add it to the master register to help keep track of it. Then, the museum sends a transfer of ownership agreement out to the donor. The transfer of ownership agreement is what seals the deal and gives the museum full ownership of the object. The donor is meant to sign it and mail it back to the museum. And then, we wait for the agreement to arrive. Sometimes for a long while. Months or years, even. But when the agreement does arrive, we file it away and now have full ownership of the object so we can start to catalog and use it. Once the object officially becomes the property of the museum, the next step is accessioning. Each object in the donation is assigned a unique number, which is used from here on out to keep track of it. Every donation gets an accession log, which lists every object in the donation and what number it has been assigned so they can be easily identified, and so that two objects don't get assigned the same number by accident. The numbering system we use at the Museum of Healthcare is 9 digits long and divided into 3 sections. The first 3 digits indicate the year the object was added to the collection, in this case 2022. The next 3 digits indicate the lot number. In this case, the object was part of the first donation made in 2022. The last 3 digits are the object number. This one is the third object of the first donation of 2022. The accession number actually gets physically attached to the object, but before we can put it on, the object has to be cleaned. The museum is well equipped with a lot of different types of supplies for cleaning and repairing different types of objects. In this video, we're cleaning an empty glass pharmacy bottle with a lot of residue on the inside. For this object, we use soap and water, a bottle brush, Q-tips and cotton pads, and a specialized bottle cleaning system which uses tiny ball bearings. The first step is to clean the outside of the bottle with a Q-tip and soapy water. This bottle has raised lettering on the outside, and it's important to make sure to get all the dirt out from in between the letters and the ridges of the glass. The inside of this bottle is a lot dirtier than the outside, with a lot of sticky residue from the medicine that used to be in it. Because the contents are gone and the bottle has no cap or cork, it's really important to clean the inside thoroughly. This can be done with a long wire bristle brush, which bends to reach all the sides and corners inside the bottle without putting any strain on the glass. The brush still has a hard time getting everything, so we use the ball bearings. With a little bit of water inside the bottle, the beads are poured into it through a funnel, and then the bottle is gently shaken. The beads get into all the little crevices and lift the dirt away from the inside of the glass without scratching it. Cleaning can be a very quick or a very long process depending on how much the object needs, but it really makes a difference. Now that the object is clean and more easily and safely handled and observed, we can begin the process of cataloging. First, the accession number that we mentioned before is now ready to be attached to the object. The Museum of Healthcare uses a paper nail polish sandwich method to do this. The accession number is printed very small on a piece of plain white paper and cut out into a tiny strip with an X-Acto knife. The number is printed instead of handwritten so that it's easier for everyone to read and it lasts longer. The number usually goes on the back or the bottom of any given object so that it's easy to find but also easy to hide when it's on display. A small amount of nail polish is brushed onto the object where the number will go, just enough to fit the little piece of paper. We use a little pair of forceps or tweezers to place the number onto the nail polish to keep things straight and precise, and to make sure that the paper sticks in place. Once it has dried, another layer of nail polish is placed over top of the number to hold it in place and protect it. Now that the number is attached, it's time to catalog the object. When a new donation is being cataloged, we start a brand new empty record. While the museum does keep paper files, we catalog all of our objects digitally so they can be accessed online by the public. The cataloging begins with filling in the basic information about the object. What is it called? What categories does it fit into? How many parts are there? And so on. We also include information about the donor and what they told us about the object. And to get that information, we go back to the paper file that was made when the donation was first accepted. Next comes the description of the object. We observe it very closely and describe it in detail, making sure to include all of its major features, like material, color, inscriptions, shape, and where and how it was made. Next come the dates, which are often filled out in conjunction with the later research portion, as it's not always readily apparent when an object was made or used, and it takes a lot of digging to find out sometimes. We precisely measure the object as well, usually in centimeters, taking note of as many dimensions as possible, length, width, height, and so on. We also check the condition of the object, taking note of any cracks or tears, missing parts, scratches, or other condition issues. This part of the record gets updated every time there's any kind of change in the condition of an object. The catalog record also has a place to record the location of an object, once it has a permanent home in the collection, and any temporary locations it might have, like if it goes on exhibit. Finally, before the cataloger puts their name and the date on the record, we do research on the object, which helps also to determine dates, makers, and more information needed for other parts of the record. Research is one of the most exciting parts of cataloging, like solving a historical mystery, but it often takes time and takes a lot of searching and reading to find the right information. The museum has a great collection of historical medical books and catalogs to help with object research. Once the object has been cataloged, it's time for it to be photographed. For small and mid-sized objects, the museum has a light box inside of which they can be photographed. It has LED lights that don't get too hot, and the walls and ceiling are reflective, helping to bounce the light around and get rid of any shadows. Every catalog record has space for 5 images, and we try to include as many sides and angles of the object as possible. For something like this bottle, we start with the front and the back, the sides, and then the top or bottom. The angles used tend to depend on the object. We try to capture its most interesting features that will also be most useful to someone looking at the object on our online database. Each photo then gets edited. The goal is to match the photo as closely as possible to the way the object looks in real life, while making its features clear. This mostly involves cropping out the background, adjusting the lighting and color, and making the image clearer. Then, we resize each image and save it in 2 different sizes, one larger one for viewing up close, and one smaller one as a thumbnail image for the online record. Editing and adding photographs of objects to our database really makes a difference in making our collection accessible to people outside the museum, as well as helping us identify items for use in exhibits, education programs, and more. Once the object is fully cataloged and photographed, it is almost ready to find a permanent home in the collection. Before it can be put away, however, the museum staff build storage supports unique to each object to keep it safe and secure. For a glass bottle like this one, a piece of thin ethafoam is measured to fit on the front of the bottle. Once placed in storage, this prevents bottles from knocking against each other and potentially getting scratched or cracked. Our shelves at the museum are very full, so each object needs a tag by which it can be easily identified. For bottles, a strip of cardstock is printed with the accession number on it and cut out to be attached to the bottle. Another strip of paper is wrapped around the bottle and taped to itself, which helps keep the ethafoam in place and gives the tag something to be attached to. The bottom of the paper tag is wrapped around this strip, so that it sticks up to be easily viewed when inside of a drawer. The process is fairly simple for something like this bottle, but many times museum staff have to get really creative when making supports for objects that may be more delicate or irregularly shaped. Finally, the object is ready to find its permanent home in the collection. The Museum of Healthcare has 2 temperature and humidity-controlled collections rooms on site where thousands of objects are stored. This keeps the objects stable and prevents deterioration, and they are kept in large rolling storage shelves to make the most of the space that we have. Every object in the collection has a precise location that is noted in the catalog record. We specify the room the object is kept in, the rolling shelf that it's in, its column and drawer, its box in the case of pharmacy bottles, and the row within the box. This detailed location system helps us keep track of all of our objects and helps to make them a lot easier to find when someone wants to take them out. Generally, objects are placed on shelves with similar things. For instance, the bottle we have cataloged will go into a shelf with bottles of similar size, shape, color, and closure type. The bottle gets tucked in so that it won't fall over or move around when the drawer is opened, and so that its tag is easily visible. So, now what happens? The object has been accessioned, cataloged, photographed, and stored. But what happens next? A lot of objects go on exhibit in our galleries to be seen by the public and help us in displaying healthcare history, but being on exhibit is far from the only work that a museum object does. Many objects get loaned out to other institutions across Canada and around the world, like these objects that went on loan in 2022 to the Brown Butter Art exhibit at the Agnes Etherington Art Centre in Kingston, and these which went to the Osler Library at McGill University in Montreal. Objects are also often used in education programs for both children and adults, and the museum even has a special education collection for this purpose. These programs allow people to get up close and personal with museum objects, something that isn't always allowed when objects are on exhibit. Students, professors, and historians of all stripes also use objects for research. Our objects have even been used in documentaries, and photos of them have been included in books. Objects don't always stay in the museum either. We often take them on the road for special events. Our public programs team also uses museum objects for social media outreach, and they tell the stories of our collection through posts, videos, blog posts, and more. But what happens even after all of that? As much as we would like to, museums can't always keep everything forever. Sometimes we receive duplicate items, or we find things that aren't really healthcare related and would be a better fit somewhere else. But don't worry, once an object has been taken into a museum, it can't just be thrown away. When the museum deaccessions something, we most often send it to another museum or a collection where it will be even more useful. So there you have it. A lot of work goes into the preservation of each and every object that comes into the museum's collections, so that we're better able to connect people to healthcare history and preserve its material culture. Thanks for watching!